Welcome, Kelly. Thanks so much for coming on the podcast today. Would love to kick it off to just have you introduce yourself. Tell us what you've done and where you've been and what's most exciting in your world right now.
Yeah, thank you for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be here. So I've spent most of my career on the brand side, working for a brand called Vicks Paula Hermani, which is a Brazilian multinational brand. About 15 of my formative professional years were spent building that business from the ground up. And then I've been on the technology side in multiple businesses. And then I ventured out a couple of years ago more into doing fractional CEO, COO consulting with brands and with businesses, which I really enjoy. One of the things that I love about it is I'm able to enable businesses that maybe couldn't make that investment in a full-time role like myself, but I'm able to still give them the knowledge and, sort of the, don't go through this door, go through this door type of things, right? That they wouldn't otherwise maybe find out or be able to have access to. So I really enjoy doing the fractional CEO or COO work because I'm able to come in more as an advisor, and help them really enable their business and their teams.
Okay, that's awesome. So you've worked with a ton of different teams, all
Yes.
shapes and sizes, I'm sure.
Yeah, I've worked with over 300 across my all of my different roles, and I've worked with over 300 brands. Touched brands.
Wow.
I mean, a lot of really brands that you would know. And then I've worked with mostly. I'm very founder focused, so I mostly have worked with founders to help them build their business. I'm kind of referred to as an integrator sometimes because you have
Okay.
that, sort of the traction model where you have the visionary
Yeah.
and the integrator. I'm very much an integrator. I speak visionary, but I understand how to focus on the pieces of the business that are often blocked by being only vision focused, right? You have to be also thinking about the operating piece of the business. So, I've spent most of my career working with founders. I kind of refer to myself as a founder whisperer because I speak their language and I know what they need and I kind of plug into their really where their gaps are and in leadership.
Okay. What common gaps do you see in founders as you work with them?
Well, I'm in early stage businesses. The biggest gap I see is that they get pulled into the day to day of running the business and being the operator integrator, and it burns them out. And sometimes the biggest gap I see is not knowing when to bring someone like myself in. That's the number one gap I see is that visionaries don't, sort of pick up the phone a friend fast enough. And by the time I get in there, it's the building's on fire. Can you help me put out the fire? And not that, obviously intense, but they're definitely frustrated and they've lost sort of their desire to be founders. Um, the other thing I see a lot is you have a lot of people that help you grow your business. They've been there from the beginning, the number one, the number two, the number three. And some people you outgrow. And it could be because the founder can't develop those people. That's one of the reasons
Sure.
why people don't grow. It also could be that they're just not the right fit for the next stage of the business. So I come into a lot of, companies where I have to have hard discussions with them about how do we make sure that your org chart is representative of what you need for this stage of the business. And that sometimes is friends and family and it becomes very personal for them. So those are like the top two things. It's always around people and making sure you have the right people in your business.
Is that are founders often able to kind of make that shift in thinking from how do they right? Because early on it's easy. And I've built a few businesses. It's easy to be like, oh, here's this thing. I need somebody there. And I like my friend or my cousin or my brother. So come in. And it doesn't really matter, like, because they're doing a task and
Right.
everything's so frantic. Um, but then when you make the shift to, oh, I need to be intentional about who am I bringing in? What are they adding or potentially subtracting from the team? And to set it up where, I'm not the only one who has to deal with them anymore. Now it has to be some other person that doesn't have that familiar or friendly relationship with them. Is it easy for founders to make that shift in mindset, or do they get hung up a lot on that?
Thinking of the 4 founders that I've worked the closest with, and 3 out of 4 of them made the shift. 1 did not, and 1 is still struggling with their business as a result because they're not able to disconnect and kind of say like, I need to make a change with this person. I need to bring
Yeah.
they're very kind of trapped in what worked in the past, right? But the 3 out of 4 and the ones that see that are the most successful are willing to say, this is not my strength and I need to bring someone in. And I need to trust that I'm bringing them in with knowledge that I don't have. I just had a call with one of my clients, and it was very similar to that. It was, you know what? They kept wanting to go back to a structure. I was showing them a new org chart, walking them through the strategy, walking them through the people, and they were like, "Well, we could do this," and it was kind of pulling back into the old structure. Well, and I have a way of talking with people so that they hear it in a very sort of caring way. But I said, "Well, that structure's not working. That's why I'm here." And they're like, "You're right. You're totally right." So there's a bit of not wanting to die to the old structure, right? Still being really,
Yeah,
and it's why, but I think the most successful founders at Aventus, as an example, that I've worked with, he knows his weaknesses and he is very humble to plug in someone like myself to augment that. And he's been the most successful founder in a lot of ways because he recognizes those things in himself. So,
that's cool. So, there's a theme with a lot of people I talk with, and it seems here that the leaders who are intentional are often most successful because one, they're aware, and two, they're willing to um, you know think through and make decisions with purpose and kind of the future in mind. How do you see that? You just shared some examples of kind of smaller companies, but
mhm.
with Aventus, it sounds like Aventus is no longer a smaller company.
No. Yeah, and he's a very intentional leader. He sets his mind, but he brings me with him. So if he has a big idea, he'll flag it down, and then we sort of architect what's going to happen together. So he's very intentional. He makes decisions. We've talked a lot about his success because in general, he's been very successful most of his life. And I've always asked him, what do you think it is? And it's the fear of failure. He doesn't have that fear. And people talk about it all the time, but exercising and making decisions, knowing that it could result in something that's not what you want, it's a bigger muscle to work than people think, and he's really good at that. One of the things that I see a lot with leaders too, in that same sort of um, general kind of speaking about that, is decisions, making decisions. When you think about being intentional, it's decision making. And one of the things I share with a lot of founders is what I learned from Jeff Bezos, which is very simple, which is there are one-way decisions and two-way decisions, right? And so I
Yeah,
talk about this, and I love that because I think most of your day is built with two-way decisions you can make, and you can reverse them if they're not the right one. And then there are the one-way decisions, and he said, like reversing prime would be really challenging, right? Because that's a big,
yeah.
right? But I think a lot of our founders think everything's a one-way decision. So they get stuck. And then what happens is the teams beneath them that are supporting them, they get into a world where they don't really feel like they know where we're going. And then the business gets stuck as a result. So I think there's a alignment with just making a decision and then saying, I'm going to make this decision work, and then moving forward and then getting momentum and making decisions. And that's another thing I do when I go into business is I help founders make decisions, because when I interview their teams, one of the things that always comes up is we have all these meetings with all these ideas, but nothing ever happens. Right. So oftentimes it's an decision, right? And I'm very big on, let's make some small decisions so we start changing how your team sees making decisions, and we end calls with what's the decision and what are we going to action on, and these types of things. And these are different, these are skills that they don't always have. But we're bringing in all of these teams and we're investing in teams, and they need to know that they're moving in a direction, some direction. So I think it's kind of like around intent is also around making decisions, simple decisions even. So
No, that's that. I As you were talking, I was like, I can be better at that. There's definitely been periods in my life where I'm really good at that, and others where it's easier to, because of the risk and fear of failure. I think it's easier to kind of just like sit on something and be like, oh well, I'm working and like there's progress, but it's like no, there a decision hasn't been made. Like it's
right.
fake work. Um, and yeah, that's a really good reminder. How have you seen? Right. Obviously, as a team grows, the founder or the leader shouldn't be making all of those decisions.
Hmm.
How have you seen leaders effectively not effectively do or not do this of being able to empower the next level or the next layer of people to feel like they can make those decisions while also staying in alignment with the vision that that leader has established.
It's a lot of trust but verify. It's making the small decisions and showing them that you made the right one. What I do with founders when I begin, they're if they don't know me, they have to trust me. They have to learn and trust me. So I do a lot of I create a lot of visual, as an example, I'll have an agency that I'm working with as an example, and I create a presentation. I don't spend a ton of time on it, but I make it in their branding and I let them see
Cool.
themselves in the presentation. And I do a lot of pre-selling. I create a Loom video and I say, let me tell you the vision for this, blah, blah, and I let them sync on, and then we have a meeting because I'm showing them that, we talk about things and then I actually take that vision that we're talking about and I show you what it looks like. And then I put a voice to it. And then I help you see the bigger picture. And by the time we get into the decision meeting, they're already bought in that one, well, she actually executes. That's a big thing for people, right? She actually executes. And two, she's already pre-sold me. I can see, and I see them. I tell their story within it. So there's a bit of that happens with building trust. It's from the very beginning. It's when they email you and say, "Hey, I'd love to meet," and then you immediately schedule that meeting. That's the first trust building. And then when you have that meeting and then you send a follow-up, that's the next. And then when they email you and say, "Let's have another meeting," and you come prepare to that meeting, now they're trust. It's like that in business across the way, right? That regardless of your role, you're always sort of proof of, I'm showing up for you is building trust. I think with founders, they've been disappointed by the time I get in there. Usually they've been
Yeah.
disappointed by direct reports. They've brought in some big players. They've basically beefed up their SG&A and they've got these, big headcounts, and they've been disappointed because they weren't the right people. So in their mind, I can't trust anyone with my business because when I do that, it goes off the rails. But there's still a bit of you still need to find the right people and you still as a leader need to develop them. Sometimes they bring me in because I'm that layer. They're not really good at developing people. So it's, can you help me hire them? Can you help me develop them? But building trust is just reps. It's just getting in the reps. And then eventually, I tell my team, I said, I don't build trust in the big things. It's the little things. It's doing the small things. And I don't have to check up on you. And all of a sudden I'm like, wow, Jacob, I talked to him and he just does it. I trust him that he follows up. Now I'm not worried about Jacob. I'm worried about someone else, right? That is not following up. It's that in business. And I think that's that with your team. And I think a lot of why founders hold things so closely is because they're not bringing in the right people. And those people aren't like performing the trust building exercise of just being accountable, right? Doing what you say you're going to do, whatever it
Yeah.
is.
No,
So,
that's so fascinating. How do you um I'm obviously there's a mix of, you come in and there's some people that you can develop to have more trust and there's others where, you should help them get off the bus. Um how and then as you're hiring new people, what are like the green flags that and maybe red flags that you often look for to know if somebody is has a higher likelihood of quickly developing that trust?
um, well, there's a couple. One of the things that I think about when I interview people is, I mean, resumes are very interesting because they're a sales, they're a piece of the sales
Yeah.
process. You take them for a grain of salt. But I do a lot of behavioral interviewing, so I want to understand who the person is. So I get through the part where I know you've worked in this company, I know you've done this job, and then I get into the more of who are you as a person and tell me about how you work with your manager. So there's a lot of behavioral interviewing. And then, the other piece is, um, I look for intelligence and I measure intelligence probably different than a lot of people, but I measure intelligence and not necessarily whether you went to an Ivy League school or you got this degree or that degree. It's how quickly can I show you something and then you can repeat and show me that back, right? What is the learning curve for you? So if I have to teach you how to put together this document and then you get it the first time, it's like, wow, they're really smart. They're intelligent. If it takes you 5 times, it's like, it's not that you're not smart. It's just that your learning curve is bigger and that's going to
Yeah.
be a more difficult onboarding for me. So I work in businesses where usually by the time we hire, we already need them to be doing the job. So I need people who can
Yep.
quickly adapt, right? So that's a big part of, and I hire people that I love athletes. I think people who've played sports, whether you played at a collegiate level or not, when you play a sport, you learn how to play you learn how to work with a team. If you're coachable, usually if you play at a high level, you're coachable, which also lends itself to being coachable in the workplace. So
Yeah.
I look who they are outside of the job because and are they what's their goals? Like what do they want to be? Because sometimes people just want to come in and learn and leave, and that's okay. And not in a negative way, but they might stay 2 years. And I have that discussion with a lot of founders because a lot of them want lifers. They're like, I'm here. I want them to be
Yeah.
here. And you've always got one person who's been here from the beginning. But I said, it's just not the way the world works anymore. You may find someone who can sit on their perch and then grow in your business. I did it with Vix. But you may find people that say, look, I really want to be own my own business. I'm going to spend 2 years. I'm going to bring value. I'm going to do my best. You're going to teach me and I'm going to move on. And I think that's okay too, you know? And it's definitely it's a paradigm shift for a lot of founders to think that way. But, I think, a lot of it is just finding great human beings that know how to learn, because really that's what college teaches you, right? I mean, I think if you're going to be a doctor, it teaches you. But if you go to business school, you're learning how to learn. I'm a business administration, and most of what I learned when I was working in businesses and building them. But I learned to figure things out by being in college and having those reps, too. So it's a people store, and finding the right people. Um, they don't always have the sexiest resume, but they have the will and the desire to learn, and they're coachable and they want to be here. It's really important. So
That no, that's awesome. Um, what's your hit rate on hiring? How good do you feel like you are at predicting those things after you
I'm
spent time with people?
I think I'm great at it. I mean, I typically recruiting will do the sort of skill set assessment. By the time they make it to
Oh, sure.
me, I'm really focused on, is this person going to be right for the team? I'm telling the story about the vision. I'm very big on letting them know what they're coming into so that they understand, which is always helpful because sometimes people don't see that. And I tell them there's the
Oh,
vision,
yeah.
here's the challenges. Um, but I'm pretty good at it. I've definitely had some swings and misses. Um, I'm better at knowing when people are not the right fit. I'm really good at that, knowing when people have been here too long, being able to identify where changes to make. When I go in, I can see I have like infrared where I can see where the problems are. But I just had someone that I interviewed for a role, and sweetest, I mean, just awesome. And it was a bumpy interview at first because she was on her cell phone doing like a FaceTime. And I said to her, I said, "Hey, I really want to interview you. I'm really excited about it. But can you please get on your laptop because I can't see her whole face?" And I was worried. I was like,
Yeah.
does she not have a laptop? And so she did, and she was nervous and she hopped back on with her headphones. I said, "That's amazing. This is great. Let's start our interview." And I ended up hiring her. But I asked her a question. I said, "What is your biggest weakness?" And she said, and I said, "Don't tell me the same thing. Oh, it's this, I'm too organized. I'm too that."
Yeah.
And she said something that was pretty powerful because it resonated with me. She said, I have anxiety and I'm an overthinker. And I said, "That's so crazy because I am too." I said, "In life, that could be a burdensome, right? Because you can't live in the present and you probably carry a lot of unnecessary worries. But in business, it's a superpower because I know you're going to care about getting things right." And I hired her, and she's exactly what I thought she was, and better, actually. So I think it's just understanding who people are, and figuring out, like, I look for those little things that maybe a lot of people don't see in people. I know what the business needs, and I need someone who's an overthinker right now. I need someone who cares. And I think that anxiety is it's given a negative, and it's really just like the fear of not knowing what's next, right? And I
Yeah.
think a little bit of that when you start a role is a good thing because it helps you show up and be present, that type of thing. So I think I'm pretty good at hiring.
That's cool. As you were explaining that, I think, right, there's often we view hiring as just like a one-way filter.
Hmm.
Of hey, are we getting the right people in? But then also there's the aspect of okay, well, how good of a company are you to work for, and how
Hmm.
good of a boss are you to work for? And as you were talking about that, it made me think, huh? I bet you're good at filtering people, and I bet you have more hits because you're able to accurately explain the vision of the company and help people understand where they fit in the bigger picture, which
Yeah.
then, is going to increase their feeling of ownership and engagement and, belonging, and overall alignment. I've had jobs where I've started them and I have no idea like how what I'm doing actually helps people or makes money. And so it's a lot harder to be engaged and like excited. But I've had
Yes.
jobs where, I knew exactly like, hey, I'm a cog in this machine, but here's where it is. And, this is the part that it plays. Um, and it's so much more fulfilling when you feel and understand that or you feel that you have an understanding of your impact and value. Um,
Yeah, I'm
Yeah,
big
no,
on
that's so awesome.
I've had the swing and misses. I mean, in my career, I've not always been great at telling the vision, and someone walks in and they have this title and this role, and they came from a much larger brand or a much larger company, and they're like, "Whoa, this place is so different. I need to wear more hats." And so I'm very big on setting expectations. I almost oversell that it could be worse than they think. So when they come in, they're like, "Oh, this is so much better than she thought." Right? Because I don't want people to be disappointed, and I want people to know what they're getting into, and I want people to know that I'm also very humble in owning where the gaps are in the business and the things that I wanna solve and why they're being interviewed, you know? And I think people come in then and they wanna be part of the solution because they understand what the challenges are, you know? So,
Yeah. Oh, for sure, and that's huge, right? Most companies oversell themselves, and then people show up and are like, "Wait, I didn't sign up for this."
yeah, it's a big
And then they keep
moment.
looking for jobs.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and then you
Um,
invest in them and they have one foot out the door, for sure.
yeah, which, isn't good for anybody. You know,
No.
nobody's happy, and it costs a lot of money.
Yep.
Um, well, thank you so much for your time today, Kelly. This was
Thanks
awesome
for
to talk and to learn about, the experiences you've had and the success. I'm excited for you.
Yeah, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. It was a fun conversation.